What's
All
up,
right.
guys?
So we are live.
Another week
Another
of
week, another show.
talking
For
about
those of you
stuff.
joining us today for the first time, for the last time, this is Beneath the Surface, a nerdy podcast where me and my co-host here will sit back and talk nerd stuff, nerd culture, stuff that happens in a game store. We're finally in our broadcasting
Yeah,
studio. So
it's a
as
nice
you can
space.
see we've got the nice mural
You
behind
can
us.
see
You
an
can't
arm.
see it at all because the camera does not focus on it.
Oh, see, there's an arm. There's a bottom of a glass. There's the artist's name right there. Or
Yeah,
actually, it's kind of behind
it's
your
kind
head,
of behind my head.
but it's there.
Um, Thanks Anna for the heads up on the whole phone thing. I actually remembered this week. Did you
I'm
remember?
so proud of you.
Yeah,
Mine has never been the one going off.
that's true.
We can go back and it's always the same ringtone.
It's always the same.
My phone is always on vibrate. It does not come
Um,
off of vibrate.
be sure to check out our link tree in the bio in the description down below the video.
Yes.
It's links to all of our socials are there, our Twitch, our
Twitter,
Twitter,
Facebook,
Facebook, Instagram, X.
I think the ways
Which is
to
Twitter.
donate if for whatever reason you wanted to financially support us.
Hey,
Hey,
I'm poor and need your money.
please.
So I'm Nick the Red. I didn't introduce myself earlier.
Oh, yeah, we
with
skipped
me
that bit.
as always is
Tyler
my
P.
partner in crime.
Tyler P. I don't have a funny color to go with my name or anything like that.
You really should. You really
Nope,
should get
never.
a color.
Refuse.
Tyler the Black.
No.
No, that wouldn't work.
No. I have white dogs. Black has been a color that I like to wear, but doesn't work out very well.
All right. So this week, we've been talking about it a little bit behind the scenes. What we planned on talking about for today's show, and just this weekend we had our liquor lock-in, which is something we do. Not the liquor part, but the
No.
lock-in part we do.
2
Every
to 3
couple of
times a
months.
year.
Yeah, every couple of months. Whenever we got 2 set releases coinciding on the same weekend, we for different games and whatnot, we say bump it. We'll just throw a lock in together. This time was special. Our friends at WePub, shout out to you guys over there. We always appreciate you. Decided to extend their license for alcohol over to us. So we had a little mini bar set up with Marissa. Thanks, Marissa. Again, we appreciate you coming over and providing potent potables.
Oh yeah. I can't think of anything more fun than mixing liquor and card games.
I can 100% right off the top of my head, like 5 things actually.
I mean, that's fair to you, but considering how many people we had
what, like 60 people in the
no,
building?
bump that up. We actually beat our record for most people in the building at one time.
What was it, 70?
The prior record was 84 people.
Jesus Christ.
And we smashed that record. In the time that we actually cared and were counting, I think we got up to about 92.
Showing off my nice new sticker.
It's so nice.
Made by CM Designs. One
Shout
of our sponsors.
Yeah, I just noticed we don't have a chat.
Ah.
But so, yeah, no, liquor lock-in. We coincided it with our Tarkir Dragonstorm pre-release, which was a lot of fun. Finding it?
I was looking for it. Keep talking.
Okay, sorry. You distract me sometimes.
I know. I'm so distracted.
I know. It's just how it goes. But yeah, so we coincided it with the Dragonstorm pre-release, which also sold out and went crazy. Can't begin to describe how busy that was. It was just pure insanity the entire time. But it was a lot of fun. Like, I loved having people there. And getting to see everyone so excited about a set is always nice to me, you know? Magic has definitely had those ups and downs with new set releases. I know Aether Drift, when it released, kind of felt a little underwhelming with its release. I think it's just because it was like jammed in right there next to the Innistrad release.
Yeah, I said as much, honestly.
Yeah.
Like it kind of felt, I don't know. They were
Just
so close together that people were excited about a lot of the reprints, and then There wasn't enough kind of focus on Aether Drift.
Yeah, it was just one of those things.
You're just gonna pull it up on your phone.
That was about what I was about to do. I wasn't going to try and draw attention to it, but that's what I'm about to do.
But yeah, so yeah, we're talking about the liquor lock-in. We had the Tarkir Dragonstorm pre-release event that started at 7 and apparently went till like 2 a.m.
Yeah, about 2 a.m. we had 45 people.
Completely sold out, which was amazing.
Yes, which again, I love when that happens. You know, it's so exciting to me when we have that many people.
Yeah.
I was trying to just pop out the chat itself, but it doesn't want to do that, so I'm just gonna have to ignore our little faces on the screen. But
only you care about that.
I think you care about it too.
I really don't.
Fair enough.
I mean, we did this sans our wonderful viewers in Mathemagic Land
for like a month.
And I was totally fine with it.
That's fair. I like having viewers, though. I like getting instant feedback on the things we say.
True. Instant is a stretch of the word, but
like 6 seconds later with the stream delay.
But yeah, so you were talking to me not 2 days ago, Saturday. You were not big up on a lot of the old lore in Magic.
I know lore from about when I started playing, which is about the 2012, 2013 time frame.
Yeah.
To my knowledge starts to fall off after War of the Spark. Because that was the time that I was playing the most. That's when I was drafting and playing limited and dabbling into standard more. Everything beyond that, when I wasn't engaging with Magic the same way, my lore knowledge started to slip. They also stopped telling the story in as upfront of a way.
Yeah.
I feel like after War of the Spark, that's when they started doing the cinematic trailers that were more like, hey, here's this random little snippet of a thing on the plane. It wasn't the classic, we're just going to turn card arts into GIFs and have someone monologue over and kind of give you that quick overview.
Right. A lot of that happened in some of the previous sets. If they were introing it like commercial-wise.
Yep.
And then if you wanted the actual story, it was, hey, buy the book that comes in the bundle.
Buy the book, or after a while it was go read some stories online.
Right. They had a bunch of like novellas, and then then it turned into short stories. Then you had to kind of piece together the whole story of the set based on not only the things that you read online that oftentimes didn't actually have much to do with the main story.
Yep.
And then also look at all of like the spotlight cards, which they started doing in Kaladesh.
Yeah, it was Kaladesh where it started.
Kaladesh was the first time they did the spotlight cards, where it specifically said on the bottom of the card spotlight.
I thought it was a set prior. Did they not do it in?
It was Kaladesh.
Kaladesh is where it started. I thought it was Battle for Zendikar. No, okay, I'll believe you on that one. Same general time frame.
Battle for Zendikar came out after all that.
No, Battle for Zendikar was the start because the second set in BFZ was Rise of the Gatewatch, or Oath of the Gatewatch, where they formed it. Because them going to Kaladesh was like their first.
Yeah, it was their first little foray after defeating the Eldrazi. Okay, no, I stand corrected. I'm not big on like modern-ish Magic stuff. I started in Ice Age. Actually, I started at the end of Antiquities because I got a little snippet about, the Brothers' War, and then into the Ice Age, and then the Dark, and then, all of that. Yeah. That was fun.
That's stuff that I know literally nothing about. I know the very broadest of strokes. I know that Urza and Mishra didn't like each other one bit. And
I have a feeling most of that just comes from the fact that they did an entire set called Brothers' War, where they basically came back and retold the story of Brothers' War.
Which is a set that I skipped. Was not playing Magic during that time, but very seriously, so. Because that was during our return to Dominaria stuff to wrap up all the Phyrexian junk, which Phyrexia was a foreign concept to me until I retroactively went back and looked at like Mirrodin Besieged,
Mm.
Scars, and then New Phyrexia. That was my first introduction to Phyrexians.
And see, I knew about Phyrexians back in Antiquities.
Yeah, when they looked a lot cooler.
Yeah, they definitely had more of a like dark metal vibe to
Yeah,
them.
like I really like the look of old Phyrexian cards.
Yeah, before Phyrexian was a creature type and they were all just horrors.
Yep. They also didn't have demons.
That's true.
I feel like I've mentioned that like four
You've
times.
mentioned that like four times. If this will be like the fifth.
Mm-hmm. First time for our viewers.
Yeah, so apparently during the Satanic Panic of the 80s and early 90s, basically Magic originally had demons and devils and things like that in it. And, you know, the
backlash of it all.
What, I'm trying to think. There's a organization, it was like Moms or something against, I don't know. Yeah. It was basically the same people that kind of fell into the whole Satanic Panic thing of the 80s were still kind of clutching their pearls in the 90s, and that's why a lot of your original art from like Alpha and Beta, when by the time Revise came out, a lot of the art had changed. They took away a lot of religious iconography and a lot of the things like the Ankh of Mishra.
Yep.
Used to be an Ankh,
and then they changed
it to make it some machine.
Yeah, no, they did a lot of changes like that, and Magic wasn't the only card game affected by that. No. I know Yu-Gi-Oh!
Well, Yu-Gi-Oh's always had a lot of like localization issues where they've removed like religion and demons and things like that.
Certain things that are a little bit more a little too risque for the average Western child.
Right.
But no, with Magic, the big one was the demons, and we didn't see demons again for several years. It was like the early 2000s is when the creature type officially came back.
Yeah.
As like a fully accepted one. Everything up to that point was horrors. They would use horrors or any other word to get around.
I want to say it was the transition to the modern border, if not right before it. It was when we actually started getting like demons and things like that back.
When it switched back from white border into black border, or
no, like I think 7th edition. 7th edition was the first new border.
Mm-hmm.
The new, like the modern border.
Yeah, the one that we still see the influence of today.
Right. The classic. I mean, honestly, I'm more of a retro frame.
I like retro frames a lot. Like, it's so crazy because when I first started playing Magic, I hated retro frames.
Yeah.
I was very partial to, I guess, what you would call the modern border, the one that we saw.
Yeah.
For like 20 whatever to about, I think M15 was when they finally changed the card border. I think that's when they started putting the hollow stamps on cards at the bottom of it.
Yeah, probably.
I think it was around M15. So everything from like whenever to about M15, like that is my favorite card design for Magic. Like that is just what I know. I wish I had one just to reference.
Bring back the Future Sight border.
I want it so. They brought them back in the mystery boosters.
Yeah, in mystery boosters that nobody can get a hold of except for like a few convention people or scalpers.
Well, at least it shows that someone was thinking about it. I can't read that.
Yeah.
Simple. I looked at it and Amelia was like, I can't read that. But no. Magic has changed so much in such a short amount of time, it feels like.
Yeah, it did. I mean, speaking as somebody who played back in the day and watching the different transitions to the newish like cards and whatnot, it was very much so eras almost.
Yeah.
Like you go from traditional borders and things like that. And honestly, I like a lot of the older, I wanted to say this earlier, but like I like a lot of the older borders because every set had a unique border.
Yes.
For the colors, right?
Yep.
So, one set you might get kind of a almost marble like look to the borders for the different colors and whatnot. Another set will have like bubbles and things like that in the border itself. They're all retro framed, but they almost had like a uniqueness to a lot of like the different borders from various different sets.
Well, it's like how I think we've talked about before that way back when the sets were supposed to be a bit more separated from themselves, to be like a much more self-contained. So they wanted to do more interesting design choices to make it
right. Like you
make
should
them
be able
feel
to
like
look
they
at,
stand out.
Their whole idea was that you should be able to look at a card at the border and tell right away like where the card came from.
Yeah.
What block it came from. If you see two cards from two different sets, you'd be able to tell if they came from the same block.
Yeah.
Without having to just know off the top of your head. And a lot of like, it was Arabian Nights when they first introduced the set symbol. So a lot of your older cards didn't have a set symbol. Or it was something like Chronicles where it was a white border version that they literally just took the image of the card and reprinted it.
Yes.
Point for point.
Onto a white border instead of the original black borders.
So let's just say back in the day when Chronicles came out, there were definitely a bunch of people that were trying to pass off Chronicles cards for like 4th edition, and
to this
unlimited.
day there are still people trying to do that. It's just, we have a much better knowledge of these things now, and you don't have to just rely on what your local card shop says or what a single magazine says. But story. The story of Magic.
I'm not super, super, super well versed, but I know enough about it to be dangerous.
Well, you know what? We could broad strokes this a little bit. Who was Urza? Like, who? I know Urza only from some of the newer cards that he's been printed on. I know he is a pain in the ass to deal with in Commander. But beyond that, what I can tell you I know about Urza is that he was apparently a really powerful planeswalker.
Yep.
He created Karn.
Yep.
He was a professor at the Tolarian Academy.
Yep.
And he had something to do with the Weatherlight.
Yeah. Broad strokes, huh? So let's see.
That was broad. That's my
that was really broad strokes. Yeah, Urza. So Urza is part of the Antiquities block. Antiquities, right? That was one of the first sets that kind of actually introduced a uniquely magic story.
Yes.
And the idea was like, a lot of people are probably familiar with it from Brothers War, but there were two brothers, Urza and Mishra. And effectively, they were archaeologists. They liked discovering ancient history, the ancient Thran people, a lot of their technology and things like that. And they had a mind for machines.
Okay.
So their mentor, Tokasia, basically taught them all about the Thran, and they basically studied with her. And like I said, she's an archaeologist, and so they discovered the Thran and everything about them, and then the fall of the Thran. The big takeaway from it is that they came across an ancient Thran power stone that was still like working, like a very powerful working Thran stone. And Urza wanted to use it to power his machines. Mishra wanted to use it to power his machines, and they ended up fighting over it. When they were fighting over it, they ended up sundering it into two halves.
Okay, so there's two halves of a stone.
That became what was known as the Might Stone and the Meek Stone.
Okay.
Urza got the Might Stone, which had the ability to empower things, make things stronger. Mishra got the Meek Stone, which was able to siphon power and things like that.
Okay.
He was able to build powerful engines and things like that using the technology. But basically, they started not liking each other a lot.
Yeah.
That's the basic gist of it. It's not too many details in that one, but effectively the arguing became fighting, the fighting became even more fighting, and then a war basically breaks out between the two of them. Urza becomes the prince of a place called Krug.
Yep.
Because he marries into the royal family. Mishra basically got corrupted by the Phyrexians. And now the first introduction of the Phyrexians is basically they were kind of siphoned off onto their own little like plane, right? And originally they were corrupted Thrans, right?
I was going to say, because I know that the printing we have of Yawgmoth, it's Yawgmoth Thran physician.
Right. He was a doctor. He was a scientist during the era of the Thran Empire, and he was actually kind of crazy and evil. And
I would have never guessed with how Phyrexians look.
Basically, he infected the population with a disease and then used it as an excuse to kind of quarantine the diseased on a different plane where he said that they would be taken care of so that the rest of the Thran Empire wasn't like affected by the disease.
Yeah.
In reality, he was experimenting on them and creating what we now know as the Phyrexians, which is why Yawgmoth is seen as like a deific figure to the Phyrexians.
Yeah, because he created that. He is their creator.
Right. So, basically they were kind of pushed off onto their own plane because back then there were no rules to like planes, right? You had Dominaria, which was the main kind of setting for the game.
Yeah.
And then they introduced this idea that parts of Dominaria were kind of forced into a different dimension.
Okay.
So you had the plane of Wrath, and you had the Phyrexian, the plane of Phyrexia. You had, at the time, Zalfir was considered on a different plane. It wasn't. And retroactively, they went back and fixed the story. But essentially, like, all of these different places that you found were considered like other planes. Okay. And the only way to cross those borders was to go through a portal, the planar bridge.
Yes.
Well, the Phyrexians could not make the passage because nothing organic was supposed to be able to make the passage through the planar bridge. Well, when it was found out that Mishra had been corrupted by the Phyrexians and the Brothers' War actually started and went into full swing.
Yeah.
Urza needed a way to defeat the Phyrexians once and for all. And so he created a weapon based on a Thran design called the Golgothian Silex.
Okay, so that's our first introduction to a Silex.
Yep, that was the original Silex. And so to end the Brothers' War, he detonated the Silex.
So he nuked them, basically.
Yeah, he basically nuked an entire island, Argoth. Argoth sunk into the sea because he basically nuked the entire island, wiping out the Phyrexians, wiping out all of Mishra's dragon engines and things like that. Basically, he thought he killed Mishra.
He thought it was just like, he was scorched earth, it's done.
Yeah, scorched earth, it's done. And that act is what ignited his spark. Okay. And he planeswalked away. So basically, the explosion's happening around him. His spark ignites. He basically becomes complete energy and transfers to another plane of existence temporarily. Yeah. He eventually comes back and actually finds the original 9 Titans. They're called the original 9 Titans. Basically, they were the first generation of planeswalkers. Because at the time, in several millions of people, you will find one person that has the potential to ignite a spark, have a planeswalker spark. And at the time, they were called Embers. And then a traumatic event basically had to happen in the person's life, something wholly traumatic. Yeah. That fundamentally changes them, and it would cause their planeswalker spark to ignite and go from an ember to a raging fire.
See, because the way I remember hearing it described was that it was a 1 in a million chance to have a spark.
Yep.
And within that, there's a 1 in a million chance that your spark is actually ignited.
Right, because several of them go their entire lives without their spark ever igniting, and then they die, and then, of course, they're done.
It's just, that is what it is.
So, this catastrophic event that literally altered the weather pattern of Dominaria, because effectively he set off a nuke in like lower atmosphere. Yeah, right. So it's going to cause problems. It completely changed the weather of Dominaria and caused eventually the Ice Age.
Yes, which is when you started playing.
Oh, like I said, I started during Antiquities, and then you had the Dark and you had the Ice Age. Basically, the Dark was the lead up to the Ice Age. Where, because of what Urza did, people started distrusting artifice, started distrusting magic, and that's when you hit the dark age of magic.
Okay, so that's why it's called the dark.
That's why it's called the dark.
I had no idea.
And then from there, you go into the ice age, where, like I said, the weather patterns changed, and it basically covered the whole plane in ice. And then you have a bunch of duders that were showing up and trying to take over, and that's where Limdul the Necromancer came in, and he worked for a planeswalker known as Leshrac, which we haven't seen ever since.
Don't worry about him.
Yeah, don't worry about him. He's just a big foreboding evil entity that's just there.
He probably got stuck somewhere at some point for a reason. We'll get a Tumblr blog post by Mark Rosewater at some point telling us what happened.
But effectively that's who Urza was. He was one of the original planeswalkers back when planeswalkers are not like the planeswalkers nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
The planeswalker nowadays are... The behind the scenes of it is that Mark Rosewater, the lead designer of Magic, wanted to kind of make them more tangible, more down to earth. So the whole event of the mending and things like that happened. If you don't know that, go look it up. It's a huge... It is a huge storyline. You should really look it up. And it actually started... The problems that were solved by the mending actually started when Urza detonated the Silex.
Yeah, so all the way back then.
All the way back then.
And
started causing problems. Because it basically ripped holes in the fabric of time and space.
Yes, which is when we get some of the most interesting design sets with... What is it? Okay, I'm going to try and go in order. It is... Time Spiral.
Yep.
Planar Chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And then Future Sight.
Yep.
Is the order that those go in. Because I always get a little caught up on 2 and 3. I just know it starts with Time Spiral.
Yeah. Time Spiral was the first one, and that was basically where time rifts were getting so bad that it was literally snatching people and places from the past and flinging them into the future.
Yeah. And vice versa, because there's some future things that you see ripped into the past.
And then Planar Chaos was basically where the energies of the plane shifted in such a way that you started getting these alternate versions of characters and places and things like that, like what-if scenarios where if the path had diverted, if history had diverted in a certain way, you get these things. That's why you have things like Braids, the Cabal minion turns into Braids, Conjurer Adept, and you had like the Sorceress Queen, one of the cards from ancient Magic times, turned into the Serendib Sorcerer. They did the same exact thing, but they were different colors.
Yeah, which is interesting.
So the same thing with like it introduced a lot of like color shifted abilities. So originally Magic had an ability called Fear, which said that a creature could not be blocked except by black or artifact creatures.
Yes.
Basically, the creature's so scary that nothing but the most evil or the most unfeeling things could stop it.
Which is what Intimidate eventually
became that.
Because I think Intimidate, the way it worked was Intimidate, it has to be blocked by a creature of the same
color
or an artifact. Instead of making it just exclusively black creatures.
Right. So Fear is exclusively black. Yes. And it did make a reappearance later on. But
yes, it's shown up once or twice.
At the time in Planar Chaos, you got a creature... what was it? It was a goblin wizard, a goblin shaman, something like that, that said it could not be blocked except by red or artifact creatures. So at the time we called it Red Fear because that's what it was.
That's what it was, yeah.
We didn't have this Intimidate. So long of the short of it.
Yeah.
Basically, that's who Urza was, and original planeswalkers, like I was talking about, were godlike beings.
Yeah, I do know that like the OG planeswalkers were way stronger than current walkers.
Effectively, they were pure energy.
Yeah, so they could do whatever they wanted.
And they manifested their physical forms through self-actualization. right? So the idea that they thought that they were like a thing, they became
they
that
were
thing.
that thing.
But effectively, they were just pure energy. Like normally, how a mage on various different worlds and whatnot, and planes and whatnot, all the planes in Magic create mana.
Yes.
That's the whole like premise of the game. The
mana.
5 colors, the land cycle of mountains, islands, plains, swamps, and forests, right? Then they all have a different flavor of mana. So mages would draw that mana out of the land
and then
use it to power their spells. Original walkers had their Planeswalker Spark was connected to the Blind Eternities.
Yeah.
Which allowed them to draw on mana from the entire multiverse.
Oh, so that's why they had so much of it.
That's so much more power, because they were literally drawing on an unlimited supply of power.
Yeah, so it makes sense then that they would just be that much stronger. Because now, I don't know where new planeswalkers draw their power from.
From the plane they're on.
Okay,
but then
so they're limited just to that plane.
Their spark actually gives them an internal power source.
Yeah.
Basically, their spark itself is still connected to the Blind Eternities, but they can't draw as much power from the multiverse. Like, they can't just draw mana from a different plane.
Yeah.
They don't generate their own mana. They are... The way it was explained to me was... because I was original, like, lore when Planeswalkers, Neo-Walkers were first created. The way that it was explained to us at the time was instead of being able to draw on an unlimited power source, they are just perfectly efficient at drawing mana from the plane they're on.
Okay.
Whereas there's like bleed off, there's waste, there's inefficiency for normal mages to draw that power. Planeswalkers had the ability to perfectly draw mana from the plane.
Do it.
So, and they are focused on mostly just one color or 2 colors of mana. Yeah. So 1 or 2 flavors of mana. While they can tap into other colors,
they're not going to utilize it.
They're mostly supposed to be like master wizards, effectively. Yeah. And their Planeswalker Spark just allows them to travel to different planes. And every Planeswalker apparently has a different way that they do it. Whereas originally, the original walkers could just think, hey, I want to go to this place that I know of, and they transition.
Yes. Which that's the big thing, is they had to know of it. And I think that's still generally a rule. You can't go somewhere unless you know.
You can't consciously go somewhere unless you know of it.
Which, I mean, we've seen that there are weird spark shenanigans, like with the Wandering Emperor.
I mean, so any walker had the ability to go anywhere.
Yes.
And it was kind of like picking a destination versus throwing a dart at a map.
And hoping that you land somewhere.
And that's just where it... And that's how a lot of them just travel to new planes and things like that, is they just open themselves up to walking to a new plane, and wherever they ended up, that's where they ended up.
Yeah. Which I imagine it would be the same risk as throwing a dart at a map and just going wherever it goes. Right. Is there's a lot of empty space you could land on that you don't want to go to, which instead of it being a giant ocean, in this case would be the Blind Eternities.
Yeah, so the Blind Eternities is basically... Think of planes as planets and the Blind Eternities being space.
It's funny because we have a set coming out that's very much seems to be treating it that way.
Which, I mean, that's the way it always has been. In D&D terms, you can think of the Blind Eternities like the Astral Sea. It's the place in between different planes.
Yes.
It's where the Eldrazi come from.
Yes, they are the only entities that we know of so far that can exist in the Blind Eternities and aren't destroyed by it.
So, Urza being one of the original walkers, one of the most powerful spellcasters of his time. Yes, he showed up in Weatherlight, which happens hundreds of years later, because planeswalkers, once their sparks ignite,
they're pretty much immortal.
They are effectively immortal. Yeah. They don't age anymore.
Yeah.
They can still be killed. It's very hard to kill,
but they can still be killed.
Mainly because one of my favorite planeswalkers, and I've talked to you about it before, Sarah. Sarah
Yes.
was murdered.
But that took a whole hell of a lot of stuff.
It took a lot to kill
Took the
her.
entirety of Homelands to pull it off.
Effectively. But yeah, so yes, they could be killed. They were nigh godlike beings. They had tapped to unlimited power, and then the mending happened.
Yeah, which the mending is where I can start to pick up the bits of magic lore. Like it's stuff that I've read or heard through osmosis a lot more than the older stuff. Because I think that's when Magic or Wizards of the Coast decided that, hey, we love telling the story through books, but we do want to explore our multiverse.
Yeah.
There's so much more going on. Let's try and explain a little bit more of this through the cards. And also just give snippets instead of here's a 300 400 page book to dive through.
Actually was the first set that they stopped doing books.
Yes, they
the
did
the original Cons of Tarkir, the original Tarkir block, which kind of is where we started with this whole conversation to begin with, was the first one that they just got rid of the books altogether.
Well, and what really started this conversation, because it was actually at the lock-in. I turned to you at some point and I said, I miss when the story for Magic was clear.
Yeah.
That's what I miss. I miss when we had a clear villain. We clearly knew what we were working towards.
Yep.
Because neither of us had a clue what was going on in this set.
Nope. I heard snippets. I heard snippets from other people talking about the set, being excited for the set. Oh my God, we're going back to Tarkir. I'm like, are we though? Because Omen Paths are kind of a thing now.
Yeah.
And you can pretty much have anybody from anywhere, Scooby-Doo gang.
Yeah, just bounce on over somewhere.
Just cameo appearance elsewhere.
Because it seems that they have very clearly decided that there is an Omen, there's at least one Omen path to every single plane across the multiverse.
Right.
Because of the World Tree stuff.
Because of the World Tree and what happened with...
Yeah.
What happened with All Will Be One.
Yeah.
And the end of the Phyrexian threat for now.
Yeah, which is another thing, I think, that Magic has an issue. It is not a card game.
Really? Do tell.
Magic has an issue in
just one, you say?
The one that I care about today.
Okay.
We don't have clear villains anymore. We dealt with every problem, and now we're kind of we're in The Walking Dead, if that makes sense to you.
Nope,
in that
I never watched that show.
Okay, so the pitch for The Walking Dead as a show and as a comic book even before it became a show, Robert Kirkman said, I want to make a zombie movie that never ends.
Ugh.
And right now, Magic has hit the, wow, it really is a story that never ends.
Yeah.
Because we have dealt with all of our major threats that have been established. And we're still hopefully in the process of establishing new ones. It's been hard to tell. We keep getting villains of the week effectively. Because just to rattle off the few that I gleaned, because I went through, you read old stuff, I went and read a lot of the new stuff. Since the end of the Phyrexian War, we have gotten Agatha, Rowan,
You mean Agnes?
No, Agatha from Wilds of Eldraine, the witch.
Oh yeah, it was Agatha. I thought for some reason I'm thinking Agnes.
I could totally be wrong. Agatha is the name that.
No, you're right. Agatha's Cauldron.
Because of the Cauldron, yeah. So there's Agatha. Rowan was a villain for a second.
Honestly, Agatha wasn't even like a villain.
No, she was just kind of. She was like a. She's part of why Rowan became kind of evil for a second. And is still maybe possibly. We don't know because they didn't fully resolve that. We have had Akhlazot's.
Gesundheit.
Though that's the one from Ixalan.
Okay.
Was the dark god.
Person. Then there was betrayer god.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
There was also the blue black god that I don't remember the name of from that set.
From that set, I have no idea.
Because it had something to do with Ixmithzol, the hidden sun.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. I tried. I know I butchered that one.
I couldn't tell you if you were wrong.
I tried. We have had Tristani. Or no, it wasn't Tristani. It was the Tristani Discordant.
Yeah. Tristani Discordant.
Yes, we had that.
But she wasn't even really a villain.
She perpetrated a murder
Accidentally.
that was spoiled before the set even came out.
Yeah, I know,
Still
right?
kind of mad about that one because I was really interested in the idea of a full mystery.
Right.
Etrada was a villain for a second.
Who?
Etrada, the Demir vampire assassin chick.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Because they thought she was the one that killed.
Right, but she wasn't.
Killed Taysa, and then wasn't.
Yeah, Taysa Karlov friggin' dying just.
That was just a thing, you know.
Off screen, no less.
Kellen was there.
Of course he was.
And then in OTJ, our villains were.
Yes.
I had to read up on this. So our true villains were in fact Oko, Vraska, Tiny Bones, and
the posse that you kind of just focused on.
Annie Flash, that's a character.
Sure. That sounds like a character.
We also had to deal with Jace disguised as Ashiok. I thought it was the other way around. Nope, it was Jace disguising himself as Ashiok.
Right.
And Kellen is even positioned as a villain at some point because he's being influenced by whatever's going on with the Fomori Vault. Oh yeah, also the Fomori are a thing. They're a race of giants.
Yeah, well, that is what the Fomori are. Like in actual reality, Fomori are giants.
And also, Loot is a baby Fomori.
Is that what he is?
Yes, that is what Loot is supposed to be. Loot also had a key to something. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Ever feel like there's somebody at Wizards that just points a fire hose at you and throws it on?
Yeah, because again, I literally read this stuff this weekend and I'm already forgetting huge swaths of information.
So cutting short the long ass diatribe.
Hey, wait, I haven't gotten done with Duskmourn yet.
I know, like we haven't even got to Duskmourn yet. And it's Valgavoth is I knew that one. That Valgavoth is apparently the villain in that one.
Yeah, Valgavoth was kind of a cool villain actually, because he was the whole plane.
Sure.
Effectively. But, and I can boil down what every villain's plan is.
Right, and then Aether Drift, there's not really, as far as I know, there's not really a villain so much as there's like bad people doing bad things.
Yeah, kinda. There's more Jace Vraska eco-terrorism drama.
Sure. Let's turn the one poster boy of magic for the last 20-ish years into the villain.
I still really feel like there's something more to it.
So let's see. Garruk becomes a villain. Then Gideon is killed.
Garruk isn't a villain anymore, though.
Well, not anymore. He got fixed. But what I'm saying is that, you had the original Lorwyn 5.
Yes.
Then they got rid of a Johnny from, like, the whole thing, and he was basically effectively replaced by Elspeth. Right?
Did a Johnny live through Phyrexia?
Yes.
Did he? Okay, so he did get cured.
He got cured.
Okay.
He was one of the people that got cured by
Jace.
No, Malira.
Okay.
Malira basically sacrificed her life
to
heal a Johnny and somebody else.
So the only
Nissa and a Johnny.
Yes.
But yeah, so the original Lorwyn 5 were a Johnny, Jace, Liliana, Chandra, and Garruk, right?
Yes.
They were the original 5 walkers, right, that we got as cards.
Shout out for going in Wooburg order.
You're welcome. Didn't do that intentionally either. Basically, a Johnny gets corrupted by the Veil. He's cursed Veil.
No, that would be Garruk.
Did I say Johnny? I meant Garruk.
Johnny. Yeah, Garruk.
I pointed at the finger I counted for Garruk and said a Johnny, which is over here.
Yeah.
But basically, Garruk gets corrupted by the Veil and becomes evil.
Yeah, that was
back on.
He
starts killing other planeswalkers.
Yeah.
Like he travels to different planes
and just kills them,
hunting down other walkers and killing them.
Yep.
Liliana's always been kind of a villain. Kind of. But it's one of those, like, new villain. Like, it's not 80s villain. It's more like 90s villain, where the 90s villain is a villain, but not that bad of a villain.
You kind of get where they're coming from.
You kind of feel out where they're coming from. So it's like you had 80s where it's mustache-twirling villains.
Yeah.
Then you have the 90s where it's like, they're not really villains. We can understand where their villainy comes from. Then you have the early 2000s style villain where it was an anti-hero was the actual villain.
Yeah.
It's
well, I could go on my whole diatribe about how I hate modern villains because they always have to be sympathetic.
Right. I don't want sympathetic villains anymore.
I just want a dude
the
that's
mustache
evil.
twirling evil guy for being evil.
I don't want to have to like feel bad for the villain.
Sure.
Like, sometimes
bring me back Ming the Merciless.
Bring me back Cobra Commander.
Nice.
Bring me back something like, I don't know, because
Destro.
Here's the thing.
Bring me back the Shredder.
And then we'll circle back to magic lore. This kind of has to do with magic lore a little bit.
Because I mean, give it a few months, it'll be all magic.
Yeah. Stop. You stop that.
I mean, what? We're getting Spider-Man soon.
I know. We get Final Fantasy before that. We just got SpongeBob. And we get Avatar The Last Airbender. I love Fortnite.
Fortnite, the card game.
Fortnite, the card game. Oh, it would do so well. Fortnite's actually already in Magic.
Yes.
It got a secret layer.
It did get a secret layer.
I forgot about that. Triumph of the Hordes is one of the cards that was printed in that secret layer. It's Battle Royale.
Oh my god. All right. Anyway, before I have any bigger of a headache.
So here's my thing: is like villains. Sometimes I want the villain to just be like, "I'm going to blow up the city because I can.
I'm going to blow up the earth."
Yeah, I don't need it to be a. I'm going to blow up the city because my parents died when I was a kid and I was raised in the foster system and I was, neglected by this city.
Right.
And it's like I don't need any of that. You're bringing real life issues into my fantasy escape.
Right.
Like art is 100% a medium to explore things that happen in the real life and digest them and talk about them.
Sure.
But not every single piece of art has to do that. It's a rectangles and squares situation.
It's like I like to say, it's like being wet and being caught in the rain.
Correct. The one leads to the other guaranteed, but
just because you're wet doesn't mean it was raining. It was rain.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you can be evil for the sake of being evil, and that's okay. Like you can have a villain that's just a villain.
Yeah, I can have a Chucky because, murderous toy.
Yeah, right. Like
for the sake of being a murderous toy.
It doesn't.
I don't need Chucky to get, this whole backstory, a family, a wife.
The tragic.
Give me Child's Play #1, where it was just a psycho, crazy, possessed toy that killed people.
And it's interesting. I'm glad you didn't use Jason as an example because Jason would be a bad example.
Jason would be a horrible example
because Jason actually has a tragic backstory.
Except if you're talking about Friday the 13th, the first one.
Yep,
because that was his mother.
Correct, and that's why Jason doesn't appear until the very end of the movie.
Yep. Mrs. Voorhees was the one doing all the murders in that one.
That's always one of those things that I think people forget.
Give me a Freddy Krueger.
Give you a Freddy Krueger? Yeah. Oh yeah. You know what? Krueger was
evil for being evil.
As long as we leave out,
he liked the kiddos and he liked to murder them.
I was gonna say if we leave out any of the backstory, but yeah, his backstory is still really awful.
Oh yeah, it's really awful. Like the reason why he's dead is because the parents found him and threw him into a furnace.
Yeah, like he was just evil for evil's sake. And Wes Craven, I think, really tried to push that home.
Yeah. Johnny Depp's actual first movie.
Yes, I think it was 3.
He wasn't even. No, it was the first one.
Was it the first one?
Nightmare on Elm Street had Johnny Depp in there before he was even credited as an actor.
I knew
he didn't even get his name in the credits.
I knew that a lot of actors got their start through either Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. A lot of modern 90s actors, 90s late 2000s actors.
If you look at the credit roll at the end of the film, he's titled as Jonathan Depp.
That's wild. Before he was even Johnny. Because I know that a couple of actors got their start with Scream in the 90s as well. That seems to be like a slasher movie thing.
I guess, but I can't really think of
I can't think of their faces or
any
names,
of them. I can see all the faces of the people that are in the movie.
Yeah.
But I can't think of anybody who got their start there. Because Drew Barrymore was a child star.
Yeah, so.
And she was in the movie for all of 10 minutes in the beginning.
It was a great, rug pull.
Sure. It's you sitting there thinking oh, it's Drew Barrymore. She's in this movie. She's in the fucking sorry.
Oh,
my first bad word of the day. Second if you're counting. Yeah, she's in the title card.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's Drew Barrymore. This is going to be great. And then all of a sudden, oh, she's dead.
That's like, I remember my first real experience with that as a movie was the American Godzilla. Not the one from the 90s.
Not the one with, that's a lot of fish.
Yeah, not that one. The 2014 one with Bryan Cranston.
Okay.
Where they pitched that Bryan Cranston was going to be in the whole movie and he dies in like the first 15 minutes.
You know another good one?
Hmm.
Deep Blue Sea.
That is a good one. That was you keep looking at me. I'm forgetting. I'm bad with actor names. I can see the face.
Samuel L. Jackson.
That's it. Oh my God.
Samuel L. Jackson. And actually that was the movie that I found out that in his contract, he has a writer for every movie he's ever in.
Mm-hmm.
He gets to pick what his character's hair looks like.
That's awesome.
I'm serious. 100%. Every single movie you ever see Samuel L. Jackson in, he has a writer in his contract that says he gets to decide what his character's hair looks like.
That's really interesting.
Which is why every movie you see him in, he has a different hair.
Because he can just do that.
Because he can do that. In Pulp Fiction, he had an afro because he wanted an afro.
Yeah.
In Star Wars, in the first three the prequels, he decided to go straight bald because he felt that Mace Windu would just be bald. In Mrs. Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children,
do whatever, that one,
right? That one, he wanted to have the friggin' Don King, So every time you see Samuel L. Jackson, if he has a different haircut, it's because he has a writer in his contracts that says he gets to pick what it looks like.
That's awesome, though. I'm glad characters get to do that. I feel like he's been sticking with bald a lot recently, though. Because, I think, he just had done that for Nick Fury.
It's just easier for him because he is naturally bald.
He's also getting up there in age.
Yeah. Dude, the things that they can do with cosmetics.
Well, I mean, we're reaching a point where he needs a stunt double anytime his character has to bend down in a movie.
He is getting pretty up there.
He's up there. I forget what Marvel movie it was. Someone pointed it out that they did a reverse shot when he had to bend down and pick something up.
I would not be surprised if it was the Captain Marvel movie.
It was around that time frame.
I'm betting it was because they de-aged him.
Yeah,
so that he could play a younger version of himself.
Yeah, it was around that time frame. They did a reverse shot for him just bending down to pick something up because he could not stoop like that, which is crazy to me.
Like that on a bad day. So I mean, I don't blame him. I'm only 40. You child.
No, 26, almost 27. It hurts. Look, man, that lock-in, I'm still feeling it. This is the first time I've ever felt it.
I saw this quoted the other day. You're getting old when it takes longer to recover from the fun that you had than it did to actually have the fun.
Yeah. I'm starting to hit that point.
I've done hit that point years ago. I can see that point at the hit down the other side of the hill.
Yeah. But, oh God. Magic. Speaking of fun, that down the hill.
Then we're not talking about Magic.
Magic can still be fun. I played a game of Magic yesterday.
Did you now?
First time in months that I actually sat down and played Magic.
Yep.
And I was reminded that the game can be fun.
You're right. The game can be fun. It is an interesting game. It has interesting mechanics. It got me through a lot of figuring out how to deal with the ADHD without medication.
Yeah. My thing is, I think... No, we can't. Burke. I think my big thing about Magic is that sometimes we blame the game for being the problem when sometimes it's the people that we sit at the table with.
100%. I 100% agree with that statement.
I think that...
Because a game is a game.
Yeah, it's a game. And the game itself functionally works. It is a working, functional game that can be a whole lot of fun. It encourages you to solve these little puzzles that they've laid out for you through these cards for ways that you can break it wide open or just win as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. I think that's good game design as a whole. The power creep is a whole other thing.
It is a problem.
The steps it takes to get to breaking that hole open.
I will say this. while power creep is a problem, it is an inevitable problem.
Yeah, it's always going to
with
happen.
a game that lasts as long as Magic has, with a game that has as many cards in it as Magic does, there is always going to be a point when you've basically designed yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
And either you have to break your own rules, which has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Wizards has broken their own rules on occasion. Or there is literally nothing new that you can make.
Yes. What I see happening is in the next couple of years, the same thing that happened when Magic kind of hit one of their big like fever pitches with Rise of the Eldrazi, where the game turned into battleship gameplay. You know, it was rush to the big thing.
Yep.
Everyone's playing, 8/8s, 9/9s, 11/11s, 13/13s, 15/15s.
I always said it felt like the design team hired a 6-year-old kid with a crayon and a bunch of blank paper and told him go.
Yeah.
Because that's what it felt like. It felt like, coming from older sets where like the biggest thing that you saw was like a 10/10 and it cost ridiculous amounts of mana, or it was a bunch of hoops you had to jump through, or something like a leveler that's a 10/10 cost 5, but it has such a huge drawback that
you never play it.
That you never play it. To then, these 9-drop 9/9s with, hey, get rid of 2 things on your opponent's side of the field whenever you swing
every time it attacks.
It's ridiculous. A lot of that felt so much like power creep.
But right after that set, what did we see?
Rise of the Eldrazi was cons.
No. Immediately after that set was the original Innistrad.
What?
It went from Rise of the Eldrazi to OG Innistrad.
Right, because they had to introduce the Sorin character during Zendikar.
They introduced the idea of him.
Well, no, they introduced
no, he had his printing. He did have his printing.
That was his first printing, was the Sorin Markov, that you could minus him and knock your opponent down to 10.
Which was totally fine in a game where 20 was your starting life total.
Right.
And he was a 5-drop.
Yeah. But the Innistrad chronologically, no, it happened right after that, because it was the whole Hell Vault and the story in cons was that, or I should say, okay, so the story in Zendikar was that the Eldrazi were originally sealed away by Ugin and Sorin, and one other planeswalker, and I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Nahiri?
It was Nahiri.
Yeah, so Nahiri, Sorin, and Ugin sealed the Eldrazi away on Zendikar. And then they were supposed to meet again. If the Eldrazi ever broke out, they were all supposed to show up on Zendikar to stop them. Sorin shows back up. Nahiri is there already, because she didn't really
lives there.
She lives there. That's her own plane. Ugin never showed up. And it was Sarkhan, Jace, and Chandra that actually released the Eldrazi on accident. But it was Sarkhan being an incidental agent of Bolas.
Yes, because he was driven mad
by Ugin
during the events of Shards of Alara.
Right, by Ugin. He was hearing Ugin's whispers to him because Ugin had died.
Yeah, because it was something that had to do with the when Alara was reborn as its original plane.
Yeah.
Something happened with all of the energies and stuff. Ugin wormed his way into Sarkhan's brain. Because Sarkhan's originally from Jund.
Yeah.
Or no, he's originally from Tarkir.
Originally from Tarkir.
But he
showed up in Jund. Yeah, because they still had dragons.
Yes.
And he was a dragon worshiper.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole block was just about Nicol Bolas trying to get his power back.
Yeah, and then
because Nicol Bolas is one of those like rare cases, and I know we're on a super long side tangent and all that stuff.
We'll circle back.
We'll circle back to it, but Nicol Bolas was an original walker.
Yeah, he had his first printing, at least as a creature in Legends.
Right, because he was an Elder Dragon.
Yes.
He was one of the first dragons ever to be born on Dominaria by the Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And they were birthed out of a dragon storm, basically.
Yeah.
I forget the story of how Bolus's spark ignited, but he was a twin to Ugin. Ugin and Bolus are twins. They basically shared a soul, essentially. So when, if I remember right, it was the battle with a Leviathan.
There's something like that.
Originally, Nicol Bolas didn't have black in his color identity.
He was just no. He's legendary creature.
No. I know. What I'm saying is the original story for Bolas
did mention nothing about him having.
He did not gain that black color, that black mana, until he defeated the Leviathan. And the Leviathan was originally a creature that was so seeped into black magic, black mana. He killed the Leviathan and ate it.
Was it like a Merit Lodge-esque?
Kind of. It was one of these like Titanic things.
Yeah.
Retroactively, people are basically, I think Wizards kind of hinted at that the Leviathan originally was like an Eldrazi type being.
Okay.
It was a creature that was so powerful and so seeped into black mana. I keep saying magic mana, that it was like one of the original walkers, essentially.
Okay.
And so
that's interesting.
It was the battle with the Leviathan where he ate the Leviathan and ended up igniting his spark. When his spark ignited, Ugin's spark ignited.
Because they have the shared
linked.
soul thing, yeah.
And all a spark is just basically potential like energies touching a person's soul.
Yeah.
So he was one of the original walkers. His card was created before the whole like battle with the Leviathan thing. So he was still a creature then. He had defeated the Leviathan, absorbed its power, and this was before they did the whole like spark igniting thing and all that, because that was Legends. Legends was old. It was old stuff. It was how they introduced a lot of the original like legend creature type.
Yeah.
It was where we get the original commander was Elder Dragon Highlander. The fact that you had to pick one of the five Elder Dragons to design your deck around, and the whole Highlander part was there can be only one.
So it's a singleton format.
It's a singleton format. Little magic fact for you.
Yeah, because I still will call it EDH a lot.
A lot of people do.
And they don't know, but they don't know that it's Elder Dragon.
But they don't understand where it comes from or why it's that way. It's because the original Commander format was literally Elder Dragon Highlander.
Well, because I remember when CEDH was Canadian Elder Dragon Highlander.
Yeah.
Instead of competitive. Just little things.
So, essentially, the Eldrazi get released.
Yes, Eldrazi get released.
And Soren's like, where the hell is Ugin at? He was supposed to meet us here. So he bamfs away to go back to his home plane.
He's like, I'm not dealing with this.
And leaves Nahiri to just deal with the Eldrazi threat during that block. So then, when they go to Innistrad, Nahiri's pissed.
Yeah, she shows up, and he goes, I'm not dealing with this, Hell Vault.
Yeah, I'm just going to send you to the Hell Vault. So when she breaks out of the Hell Vault...
Which wasn't until our return to Innistrad.
Right.
When she breaks out. So she was stuck in there for...
a while.
A long time. She was rightfully pissed off at that point.
Right. So in the original, after Innistrad comes the Tarkir.
After Innistrad is returned to Ravnica.
With the whole guild pack thing?
Yeah, when the Dragon's Maze and everything.
Okay, so I'm not talking about like the blocks, but basically the story that kind of continues. Because... Return to Ravnica really didn't have much to do with what was going on with the whole Eldrazi thing, the whole Tarkir thing.
It didn't tie in directly because it
was mostly
set
Bolas.
Up little things.
It's mostly Bolas. Bolas
doing things.
And it harkens back to what we were talking about earlier, is the fact that Magic has not had a major villain for a while because for the longest time, Bolas was the villain.
Bolas
was the villain. If something is going wrong on a plane, it's because Bolas was involved with it.
Bolas involved in it, and Tezzeret somewhere doing it.
Which is why we had Kaladesh being the way it was, because there's Tezzeret
really the only major
doing Tezzeret things.
The only major thing that came out of Dragon's Maze, and like that whole block, Jace got with the one elf chick from Selesnya. He mind wiped her. Amara, I think was her name. Is her name?
Okay.
Is.
Tandis?
Trandis,
whatever their
name.
Trandis,
Yeah,
I know
whatever.
What
yeah,
you
know
who
I'm
talking about.
He got with her. He mind wiped her because he found out about Demir plots. Fought with Ralzeric, became the Living Guild Pact, and stopped the Mace's End from destroying the whole plane.
Right.
That is the entirety of that.
So you gotta love Magic's like lore and how originally a lot of like the things that were going on were tied into things that happened later, or things that happened later were tied back to things that happened before.
Mm-hmm.
In the original Ravnica block, the reason why that we even had to go back to Ravnica was because in the original Ravnica block, the original guild pact that was created to protect the plane and make it so that nobody could fight each other did not include the Dimir.
No, because the Dimir wasn't even an officially recognized guild.
It wasn't. It was supposed to be a secret 10th guild that wasn't supposed to exist, and knowledge of it existing was what caused the original guild pact to fail.
Yes.
And caused the Nephilim to show back up.
Yes.
Because the original guild pact basically kept the plane together.
Yes.
And through manipulations by a certain elder dragon.
I wonder who it could be.
Again, for the longest time, if something went wrong on a plane, it was Bolus's fault.
Yep. You could just always chalk it up there.
The cop.
Lavinia.
Nope. It wasn't Lavinia. It was Argus. Argus Koss.
Oh, yeah, before.
Arrested Sazdek. And outed him as the leader of the Dimir, which immediately caused the guild pact to be defunct.
Yep.
And he was manipulated into it.
And then, at some point during Return to Ravnica block, Isperia vanishes. Because that has to set up for Isperia just being stuck on Ixalan.
Yep.
And why Jace just is given the position of being
the head of the Azorius.
The head of the Azorius as the Living Guild Pact.
Yep. Well, that was the whole thing, is that the reason why the Dragon Maze existed and everything like that was because in the center of the Dragon's Maze was the new Guild Pact. The power to recreate the Guild Pact. And so each of the 10 guilds sent representatives to run the maze.
Yes.
And the Azorius picked Jace to run the maze for them.
Because Isperia was gone and they had to... But normally it was 2 people running the maze for them. I noticed. There was normally 2 runners. Because because there was Lavinia and Jace. And then there was...
Because Augustine basically appointed Lavinia, and Lavinia convinced Jace to help her.
Yeah. And then a few of the other guilds had 2 people. Because, like, Izzet had Ral and that one lizard dude. Or no, it was Malik something. The living plasma dude. Izzet
the
Paragon.
Weird.
Yeah, the weird.
The Izzet Paragon, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically they had 2 runners to run the maze. Mm-hmm. Whoever won basically got to control it, and because Jace was impartial, he basically just recreated the original guild pact,
but included the Dimir.
And included the Dimir this time, so it wouldn't happen again.
Yeah, because what he discovered is that just if any random person were to just finish the maze, and they were not of a sufficient power, the guild pact would just destroy the plane.
Yep.
It would wipe it all clean. The guilds would reform, is how that would work.
So, because Jace, being a planeswalker,
he was able to deal with it. So that was...
Later, he transfers the guild pact to Niv Mizzet.
Yes. That's how he brings him back to life.
Right.
Is with the power of the guild
pact. The power of the guild pact, he brings him back.
Yeah, you get Niv Mizzet reborn.
Because again, Bolus doing Bolus things. Which is honestly why I was kind of glad they got rid of him, because I was getting sick of him.
I like Bolus as a villain.
But that's just it. It's like every time you turn around, it was Bolus this, Bolus that, like Agents of Bolus and.
But I want you to tell me right now that you would not be relieved to have Bolus back as a villain.
Okay, so the way I would like the story to kind of progress from here would be that you have your villains, and you have these powerful villains that show up, and there are problems that could happen over multiple sets and whatnot. But I kind of wish they would do it kind of like how Doctor Who did their revitalization.
Yeah.
Where every episode of Doctor Who had a complete story, had a beginning, middle, and end.
Yes.
But there was always an element
that played
tied through every single episode. And so I kind of wish that was kind of the case with a lot of these magics, especially since they gotten rid of the three set blocks.
I really miss 3 set blocks
and the 2 set blocks.
So I 3 I think was the perfect number.
3 was good, except that oftentimes your middle set was always garbage.
Because I remember it. Because I remember
it was the curse of the middle set.
Yes, because the first set that I remember doing pre-release and going to stores and playing in regular events, I started doing that in Theros block.
Right.
You know, I started playing around.
And Born of the Gods was just, it was good for the story,
was,
and it was a good way to transition from one set to the other. But honestly, I preferred the way that they did it with Cons, which was a three set block.
And Fate Reforged was actually a very good set.
Fate Reforged was good, but the idea was they went into it with the idea of for draft, right?
Yeah.
So the first set, the way they designed the set was actually from the bottom up.
Yes.
They started the top down. It went top down.
Was it top down? Okay.
They knew that they wanted a big plane embroiled in war.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted the other half of it to be
dragons,
a different perspective. So like on one side you have one perspective, on the other side you have a different perspective. And then they figured that the set in the middle could be the transition between the two. And so they had 2 ideas. It was, we want to do, originally they were going to do 4 clans.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, we want this to be just a giant civil war. And then they were like, but now we need another kind of war happening for a different reason, but it to be like the other side of the war, a different perspective. And then the second idea they had was they wanted to do what was the original idea? It ended up being a time travel story because
Sarkin.
Because they didn't have the whole like details worked out at the time, but it was basically like a time travel. Like, how do we go from being, 2 sides of a war, right? First set, you get perspective of one side of the war.
Yeah.
Third set, you get perspective of the other side of the war. And then in the middle, it's just nobody is right, everybody is wrong, everybody fighting.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, how do we do that? How do we go about doing that? And they're like, well, we could do like where there's like swapping of sides and things like that. And they're like, time travel.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, okay, sure. Because the default cliched answer is always time travel. So that's when they decided that they would do the whole time travel arc where it would be Tarkir has the 5 clans. And that actually came about because the Sultai weren't really a thing yet.
Yes.
And so they were like, well, let's make a sneaky, underhanded, backstabbing clan to kind of go with everything. And that was the Sultai. And so they're like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? Well, we haven't seen 3 color pairings since Alara.
Yeah.
And Alara had the shards,
so
which
now we need the wedges.
Side, so now we need to do wedges. Because they did originally have Mardu as a wedge.
Yes.
But then there was one that was like Demir or something.
They all used to be called different names.
Right.
The clan names, and I know they still don't stick. I hear people call, like, to this day, Jeskai is still going to be called America.
Occasionally.
I've heard some really weird names for Mardu, or if I say Sultai to someone, they're like, what are you saying? And I have to go,
it's
black, blue, green.
It's one of those things that we just gotten out of the Ravnica stuff where we had the 2 color pairings and they all got really good names and the names kind of stuck and they still stick today.
Yeah. Well, and the shards, those names still stick.
They do, but those color pairings are like the shards, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Tarkir wedges still carry over. You still hear Jeskai. Like, yes, when the original colors that are like those from like the older sets.
Yeah.
They used to be tied to like the Elder Dragons. Not like the OG Elder Dragons, but like the second generation of the Elder Dragons, like
the ones
Rith.
that were wedges. So it was called like Rith.
Rith and
the invasion block ones.
Yeah, the invasion block ones. So nobody really called them that. Or like you had the Ana, you had it was like Hana, Ana, and something else were like, or Sarah. Ana, Sarah, and something else were like the battle mages, the Ana battle mage and whatnot, were the 3 color pairs, right? You had the Thornscape, the Thornscape familiar and the Shimmerscape familiar and things like that. So there were cards back in the day that actually related to the 3 color wedges, but they didn't stick. They didn't have that staying power. When we got cons and you had distinct, identifiable like groups, it was Ravnica all over again. Yep. Everybody was like, oh, Mardu, Jeskai, Sultai, Teamer,
and I've been thinking about it because for some reason, I don't know what it is. When we talk about old sets, the first thing my brain always goes to isn't a card. I go back to the old commercials or not, like the ads and trailers they would do on YouTube. I think something that
on TV.
Magic misses at a certain point is because we don't do a 3-set block anymore. You don't get that one set of just, this is the plane. Because that's something I remember. That's something that made Theros so engrossing. Is that Theros, just the initial Theros set, there was no major overarching plot just yet. They were starting it.
But it wasn't like...
It wasn't the forefront.
It didn't dominate the set.
No, because it was, this is Theros, here's an overview of this plane, here are the 5 monocolored gods, and the only plot thing you got was Elspeth and Pelukranos. And that's it. And Elspeth's name was Elspeth Sun's Champion, so you knew that she was fighting for Heliod. And it was like Pelukranos World Eater or something like that.
Yeah, some cataclysmic level event. She shows up on the plane.
Deals with it.
And
then Xenagos was in that. Or no, Xenagos wasn't until Born of the Gods.
Xenagos...
His first printing wasn't until Born of the Gods, I believe.
Was it Born? I'm pretty sure Xenagos as a walker was Theros. He didn't become a god until Born of the Gods. And then Journey to Nyx is where he was murdered.
Yeah, because that's where we also got the god...
Godsend.
Godsend
or God's End.
Yeah, God's End.
Well, it's both.
Yeah.
And they actually pointed out, like, because I played during that block.
Yeah.
I actually did the pre-release for that one.
I remember they had the special event that you could do.
Yeah. And they pointed out that it could be either.
Yeah.
It could be either Godsend, meaning that Elspeth was sent by the god to put down the other god, or God's End because it's a weapon that has the capability of killing a god.
Yes. Because it was not hyphenated. It's not a hyphenated card.
It is not hyphenated.
No, but I think that's something that Magic misses. I think that we need to go back to 3-set blocks.
I would compromise with the 2-set blocks.
I still feel like those were a little rushed.
They did feel a little rushed because you still got that overarching plot in the first set, but the first set still just kind of introduced you to the world.
Yes.
And then the second set kind of is the conclusion, right? But if they went back to the 2-set blocks, then I feel like you could have that plot thread that goes through many of the different, the different stories. Because, again, Kaladesh being the first one that I could think of. Because they experimented with it originally in Lorwyn.
Yeah.
Because it was Lorwyn and Shadowmoor. And then it was Morningtide and Eveningtide and Morningtide.
Yes.
And it's on the same plane.
Yep, all of that takes place on Lorwyn. It is the same plane,
but it's two set blocks.
Yes, that make up the full
story of the plane. This idea that the Great Aurora happens and diametrically shifts everybody's alignment.
Yes. So here's my thing though. My argument for 3 set blocks. What is a natural story structure?
Beginning, middle, and end.
First set introduces the plane. Middle set introduces the major overarching conflict and our main antagonist reveals themselves. Third set is the conclusion of that. I feel like with 2 sets, one of them has to do both parts of the story.
Right.
And it ends up getting a little shafted for it.
Yeah, but with the 2 sets, you could have just 2 larger sets. You could have like the 250, 280 card set in set 1, and you
Yeah.
could have another 250 card set in set 2. With the 3 sets, you either had big, little, little, or you had big, little, big.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with doing big, little, big is that it's the draft environment, really.
Gets rough.
It gets rough. And that's why I was saying, like, why I like what they kind of did with cons was this idea that in set 1, you would draft set 1. Because the set was wholly designed around the idea of drafting.
Yes, which I wish they would do that again.
So set 1 you would draft by itself. When set 2 came out, you could draft set 1 and 2 packs of set 2. Right, you would basically, the draft environment was, here's 2 packs of Fate Reforged, here's one pack of cons, and then you would draft that way. And then when set 3 came out, now it's one set. No, no, that was what was different about it. You get 1 set of set 2 and 2 packs of set 3. You didn't get set 1 packs
because it was erased from history.
Right, that was the concept. That's why I said it's a top-down design for the original Tarkir block. Because they had the concept as to how they wanted to do it, because they noticed that what you normally did was set 1, you drafted all of set 1. Set 2 comes out, you draft
2 and 1.
2 and 1. It was usually 2 packs of set 1, 1 pack of set 2, or vice versa. And then depending on if it was like large, large, small, or large, small, large.
Yep.
And then when set 3 comes out, you'd only draft 1, 1, and 1.
Yes.
Right? And so their whole idea was, we want each set to have like a focus, right? A focal point on that set. We want people to invest in the storyline, but for each set.
Yes.
So that's why it's when the first set released in cons, you got 3 packs of cons because you have to have 3 packs.
Yeah.
When set 2 released, it was 1 of cons and 2 of Fate Reforged. Then when set 3 released, it was 1 of Fate Reforged and 2 of Dragons.
Because you can see the story progressing.
Each set got a focus.
Yes. And I guess that's a big thing, is it feels like Wizards doesn't focus on the story anymore.
I agree. Like it definitely feels like, and this is just my opinion.
Of course, it's all opinion.
This is all opinion. That the story is secondary to mechanics and flavor.
Which, I mean, I feel like flavor is part of the story, but
it is. But I feel like it's the forgotten. Like it's been forgotten for so long. Story itself has been kind of forgotten for so long. Because like you told me right before we started streaming that the Omen Path arc apparently started at the end of Phyrexia All Will Be One.
Yes, and that was a year-long arc.
And it was a year-long arc of every set having to do with the Omen Paths. And Kellen was supposed to be the main character.
He was the main. He shows up in every single one of those sets.
He shows up in every set. And I did not care.
No, and it's also, there was, if you weren't really paying attention to that, you would have missed the through line completely. You were more just like, why is Kellen here?
Yeah.
Why are we getting another Kellen?
Like they expressed like, oh, you're gonna start seeing like legendary creatures from other planes start showing up on other planes because of the Omen Path, and a lot of people were like, oh, that's cool. I get the whole like planeswalker fatigue, especially after going through War of the Spark and getting so many planeswalkers. So I get that one, but at the same time, like, if I'm seeing the same characters over and over again, and the characters weren't that popular,
it's kind of just
it's like I don't care about this guy. I just want to see the cool cards. And that's kind of where it feels like the original like stories and whatnot really made you invested in the characters in the thing.
Yeah.
You know, I remember reading the Kamigawa books, the original Kamigawa books, and learning about who Toshiro was and who the Umezawa are.
Yeah. Well, and you also got to learn like the lore of you got mentions of Tamio. Very, very vague ones.
Right.
Because of the Moon Sages. There was a Zami's whole story.
Yep.
Which not explained in the cards.
The Myojin of Knight's Reach.
Yeah.
the
All
fact
the
that,
Myojin.
well, specifically Myojin of Night's Reach, because she was the only Myojin who was powerful enough to actually shift planes without being a planeswalker.
Yes.
She could actually go to Dominaria.
Yeah.
And it's apparently her mask. Her
Really?
mask was something, was a big thing back then, because she actually fights Bolas.
Along with Toshiro Umezawa?
Yeah.
Because Toshiro also fought Bolas.
Yeah, and during that fight, I think the mask that Toshiro was wearing was the Myojin's mask.
That's interesting.
But it was a fake.
Oh.
It was a replica. And so it didn't actually have her power behind it, and so it cracks. And I think you got a card of it, but it wasn't called like the Myojin's mask or anything like that. Oh man, what was it? It wasn't the veil.
I vaguely know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was a big thing.
Look it up.
It was a big thing.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading that in the book. This whole like duel on a beach somewhere between Bolas and the Myojin. Like Bolas showing up and mocking the Myojin. Yeah. And it's like, why is Nika Bolas here?
Like, what does he have to do with this?
And then it goes into the main story probably because it was Toshiro's ancestor, who was originally from Dominaria, who defeated Bolas originally.
Yes.
And he's still pissed about it.
Yep, to this day.
Do
you want to know something crazy? We have spent the whole last hour and a half just straight talking about Magic. You said you were done with Magic.
Old Magic.
We've talked a little bit about new Magic.
I am not interested in playing the game anymore. It doesn't mean I don't enjoy the story.
That's fair.
Because that's the biggest thing for me. It was story trumped mechanics always for me. It always does. In D&D it does. In Magic it does. I liked the lore of the stories. Oh, great. More spam.
I got it.
Get him!
I can
kill him.
I can't kill him, actually. I'm not signed in on Deep Dive account.
Hey,
made me sad.
Anna, if you can, get on there and like kill him.
Kill him. Get him.
Kill it.
Anyway. In Minecraft.
It's a robot. Nobody cares.
In Minecraft. But
anyway,
we could keep talking about this next week. I'd be down to do more Magic, just Magic lore overview.
I mean, if it comes up, it'll come up.
Yeah.
It's mostly like the enjoyment that I had with the game back in the day more revolved around reading the stories, learning the stories, looking at the cards and things like that. Like Urza was a villain for the longest time.
Yeah. Urza was given that
villain. He was kind
role.
of a dick.
Yeah.
Like
nobody liked.
Literally Gerard cuts his head off.
Yeah.
Like the whole scene, Phyrexian Arena in that card.
It's him cutting his head off.
It's him dueling this old man.
Yep.
Who had a lot of his power sealed away and then getting his head cut off.
And then he finds out, that was Urza.
It was Urza. And honestly, Urza didn't care.
Yeah.
Because he's still a planeswalker.
So he was fine.
It's whatever. And his head ends up becoming part of like the legacy weapon.
Yes.
And it was around that time, I think his spark basically transferred to Karn.
Yes.
Because Karn actually carried Urza's spark for the longest time.
And then he eventually got his own spark.
Nope. Wasn't his.
No. He got Venser's spark.
Venser
gave his spark.
Used to be one of Urza's students.
Yes, and he ended up dying. Mirrodin.
He sacrificed his spark to save Karn.
Oh, when he was being corrupted by the Praetors.
Because basically, real quick, because I know we're getting short on time.
We're hitting that time.
So we have the OG Mirrodin block in store right now.
It's really exciting.
And a lot of people were really like vibing with it. But a lot of people didn't know like about the original Mirrodin block. So
Argentum.
Yeah. So there was a plane that existed called Argentum. Karn shows up on this plane because it's a plane that's basically covered completely in artifice and in machines, artifact.
From the mycosynth.
Because of the mycosynth. And Karn basically wanted to, I forget like his real reasoning for it, but he basically wanted a plane that was devoid of natural life because he felt guilty about, that's what it was, during the Weatherlight Saga.
Yes.
Karn is a pacifist. Always has been. He was designed to be a pacifist. He was designed to not be a weapon. he was designed to be able to transition to other planes by Urza, because that's why he's Karn the Silver Golem, because silver was a material that could actually shift through planes without being damaged.
Because it was non-organic.
Because it was non-organic, but he was a pacifist. He did not take up arms to fight anything or anyone. And one of the ways that Volrath tortured him was he put him in a cargo hold on the Praetor with a bunch of goblins. And then started causing the ship to shake back and forth, and because of his mass, he would fall into the goblins and kill them. And it tortured him.
That is such Looney Tunes villain energy.
It's great. So basically, he accidentally killed things. He was so broken up about it that he wanted to go somewhere that there was no organic life, where he couldn't hurt anything or anyone. So when Urza's spark, basically, when he absorbed Urza's spark, he planeswalked to Argentum. And while he was there, unbeknownst to him, he was carrying Phyrexian oil.
And that started all the events
out of him, right? And so for any of you who don't know, Phyrexian oil is a corrupting substance. It corrupts anything that it touches, and it turns them into Phyrexians.
Yes.
But it requires organic matter as well as artifice.
Yes.
There's always an organic element. So what ended up happening was when he left Argentum, he left it, and there was a little bit of this oil that was still corrupting him, but it bled out of him into Mirrodin's core and started corrupting the core, which started causing organic life to evolve on the planet. And so by the time he comes back in like thousands of years have passed in Argentum, and basically organic life started evolving on the planet.
Yeah.
And so you had the Aurochs, like the Auroch salvagers. The Aurochs are the white humanoid kind of race people. The Leonins were there.
The Mirror.
The Mirror were something else.
The Mirror were still robotic, but they began to become...
Get to that. Don't rush me.
Well, didn't you just say we're trying to go?
He left. Well, when he left Argentum originally, he created a creature to be the administrator, basically.
Yes.
He created. Now I can't think of the guy. The 7-drop artifact creature, 7/7 artifact creature that you can pay 7 mana and steal shit from people. Turn it into an artifact and then steal it. He's blue identity.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. What is his name? It's
Memnarch.
Memnarch, thank you.
Memnarch.
Yes. He created Memnarch.
Yes.
Karn created Memnarch. Unbeknownst to him, Memnarch was corrupted by the same oil, and so he started going crazy. Memnarch, being the arbiter, the administrator of Argentum, created the Mirror to help him.
And then that became a whole...
Right, so that became a whole cycle of these mechanical creatures that lived on the planet.
Yeah.
That lived on the plane, and so you had the... there were vampires. There were the Nim, which were zombies, basically. You had... So each color identity had 2 races, basically. Red had... the Volshock, and had I think it was Volshock. Was it the Volshock? No. It was the goblins, the Kark goblins, the Kark clan.
Because that's
goblins.
where you get Kark clan or Ironworks and all that.
Right. So the goblins, you had goblins and ogres, and then you had the Volshock, and you had the Sylvok, which were the elves and some of the humans.
Yeah.
You had the Auroch and the Leonin for the white, and then for blue you had the Lumen Guard.
Yeah, and I know what you're talking about.
Right. The wizards and artifact dudes. And then all the Mirror were on the planet. But basically the Phyrexian oil created life so that it could then corrupt that life and turn it into new Phyrexians.
Yeah.
So when you have the original Mirrodin block, basically it ends with Karn basically being trapped in the planet, in the core, it all being corrupted, and then we leave the plane and go off and do other things.
And then other stuff has to happen.
And then Mirrodin Besiege happen.
And that's when Venser shows up.
Venser shows back up, finds Karn. Karn is being completely corrupted by the Praetors. The Praetors basically evolved out of life on Argentum, which became Mirrodin.
Yes.
Because the Mirrans are the creatures that evolved on the planet, or on the plane. And basically, so Venser comes back, finds him corrupted. They end up destroying Urza's spark.
Yes,
which
because it's been corrupted.
It's been corrupted completely. So which it kills Karn, and so as a way to save Karn, Venser gives up his own spark,
and that kills him in the process.
And he dies in the process. But he revives Karn. Karn then cleanses the planet, but he doesn't win. He can't win. It's so corrupted now that the Praetors basically rise up and are now the de facto leaders of the planes, and it becomes New Phyrexia. So he leaves, trying to find help to defeat the Phyrexians, hoping that they're locked away on the planet because they can't planeswalk. So they're locked on Mirrodin, which now is New Phyrexia.
Yes.
And it wasn't until everybody's favorite Elder Dragon,
Nicol Bolas,
trying to find a way to get his spark back, that we have the whole mending thing happening.
And that's where...
Yeah. So the mending happens. Many planeswalkers lose their sparks there because they use the power of their sparks to shut the rifts.
Yes.
And Bolas is now pissed because he lost his power.
Yeah. And
after the mending, and so now every single machination that happens, every single thing that you see from the point that Future Sight happens and the mending of Dominaria happens to when he's defeated in War of the Spark is literally Bolas trying to get his power back.
Yeah.
Everything that happens.
Everything.
From Alara reforming, where he basically tried to use the planes, the explosive energy of the plane, reforming itself into its original form to get his power back, absorb the power, and he fails. To when he goes to Amonkhet and usurps the original gods of Amonkhet and basically has everybody worshiping him as a dragon god.
That was his long play goal.
That was his long play goal. And basically using the people of the plane to create an army that could harvest sparks for him and could go through the planar bridge. Why he corrupted and manipulated Tezzeret and made Tezzeret a slave to him. Yeah. So that he could convince Tezzeret because Tezzeret was originally from Esper.
Yes.
And so that Tezzeret could absorb the planar bridge and use it to transition an army. The fact that he basically manipulates Vraska to finding the immortal sun, which is actually just like a beacon that can call planeswalkers.
Well, and it locks them down.
They can't shift away. So he basically tricks them all of plane shifting there, even some that are so weak that they can't, like...
They just get forced there.
They just get forced there, to then using the army to harvest all of their sparks and absorb them into himself so that he could reignite his original spark.
Yeah. It was a lot.
And so I wouldn't mind them going back. TLDR, I would not mind them going back to doing these long-form stories, but give us somebody new.
We'll get there. I hope we'll get there.
I don't want to see the Phyrexians again, even though I know basically they'll come back eventually, because instead of resolving it, instead of killing them all off or banishing them away for all eternity, they're just plane shifted away. Or they're
the same thing with Bolas.
They're phased out. They're phased out because Zhalfir and New Phyrexia switched places. So Zhalfir is back, and we haven't seen anything about Zhalfir. And New Phyrexia is shifted, is phased out, right? But that's basically Wizards going, I'm just gonna take this and just slide this in my back pocket so we have it for later.
Yeah.
Same thing with Bolas.
Yeah.
Ugin traps him on the meditation plane, and we literally just got told that he got free.
Apparently.
Supposedly. In Tarkir Dragonstorm.
I still need to confirm this information.
Yeah. Unsubstantiated
That's what I was told.
rumor, but basically, he's free again.
So he'll show up eventually.
I mean, his mind is gone.
Yeah.
His memories are gone, but it's Bolas. who knows what's going to happen.
And we can talk about more of it next week at this point. Because if I don't cut you off now, we're going to go for another hour.
Probably. I mean, anything for me to complain about things, honestly.
We haven't been complaining a lot, actually. We've
really
just been
haven't.
talking. That's what makes this fun.
That is our time for this week. Thanks for joining us. Again, follow us on all of our social medias.
We're everywhere.
You can find our LinkedIn in the doobly-doo below. That is actually what it's called.
The doobly-doo.
It's called the doobly-doo. I'm Nick the Red. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, my hetero life mate, Silent Bob.
Don't like that. Tyler
P. Everybody loves a Jay and Silent Bob reference. I
think we're starting to reach a point where people are aged out of that. Aged out of that reference.
I hate him so much.
So anyways, we'll see you guys next week when we're talking about potentially more magic, maybe other stuff.
Magic, hopefully something
maybe
different.
We could just start talking about Warhammer lore, and that can be like 100 episodes.
Sander and Coda did it first.
They did.
Did it better.
Catch y'all later.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. Have a good one. And